Hello people of all kinds, Scorching here. I'm here to do a rather late review of the new Crown the Empire album, or I should say the latest Crown the Empire album, because this is about 2 weeks old, about. I did pick it up eventually, but it took me a little while, because they weren't streaming it on Spotify or anything, so it took me a while. I basically just had to buy the album physically, which I was gonna do anyway, but clearly Crown the Empire doesn't really trust their fan base. I can kind of understand people don't really buy albums anymore. I was actually very hyped for this album whenever I first heard the first 3 singles. Zero was a very solid song, Weight of the World was a bit weaker, and then Hologram, probably my favourite song on this album, honestly, Hologram. You know, they definitely built up my expectations. I had pretty high hopes for this album. But after actually hearing the whole album, it's honestly quite a big disappointment. What I'm getting from this is that all these songs feel like they work very well as standalone tracks individually. They're all fairly solid, but once you sort of compile all these 3-minute tracks together into 11 tracks, it gets kind of repetitive, and this album just starts to feel very predictable, both lyrically and structurally. Opening track SK68 is one of those intro tracks that I just kind of look at and feel like, was there any need for this? It actually has quite a lot of potential, and I feel like it does do a decent job at opening up the album, but it's just one of them intro tracks that I just don't feel the need to listen to if I want to listen to this album. I might as well just skip to Are You Coming With Me, which is an actual pretty solid opening, proper song. When I say potential with the SK68, I'm kind of referring to the fact that it sounds like it's meant to be building up to something, and I'd be okay with that if it flowed very nicely into the next song or something like that, like it really built it up. But it doesn't. It just feels it is its own thing. And I kind of would have liked them to come in with guitars or something towards the end of that track, almost kind of like the song Wake by Linkin Park that opens up their album Minutes to Midnight. I kind of get a vibe similar to that on this track, but this track just feels wasted potential, and a lot of this album also feels like that. I'd say the other instrumental, The Fear Is Real, also has this problem of just an instrumental that it just feels like filler, basically. The Fear Is Real does actually flow nicely into the next song on the album, Lucky Us, but again, I just feel like I might as well just skip to Lucky Us. I don't feel the need to listen to this 3-minute, nearly 4-minute long instrumental. But enough about the instrumental tracks, let's talk about the actual songs on the album. The band's new sound has its pros and cons for me. First of all, I'm happy that they've got rid of the generic, just really generic metalcore riffs that just sort of plagued I'd say their second album more so than their first. But admittedly, this album does actually feel less original than their first 2 albums, mainly because it just lacks all the personality and character that I loved about especially the first album, The Fallout. I just love that album just for how much personality and character it has. There's none of that on this album. This album just feels very inhuman and just unsincere in its lyrics and sound. You know, all that creepy carnival and steampunk themes that you had, it's just gone. And you've got this kind of retro theme that they're going for in the music videos and stuff, and it kind of seeks through a little bit in the songs, just with some quotes like the one in Hologram, but it doesn't really do anything for the album. Also, lyrically, see, I didn't really mind the lyrics in the first 2 albums, just because they were telling a story, and while the story was nothing incredible, it definitely kind of gave the lyrics a purpose. It gave them context, basically, but there was no kind of clear sign of an actual story on this album. Instead, it just feels like a bunch of radio rock songs, essentially. But what that basically means is that all these lyrics about "you're not gonna kill me" and we're taking back our lives just doesn't make any sense. There's no context. There's no reason for them lyrics, and it just comes off as these lyrics that are just trying to sound kind of cool and edgy and whatever. Like, this is especially disappointing when I see all these like deep quotes from philosophers and stuff on like their Instagram, and like them trying to be like really deep and hippie kind of. But you know, these messages just don't come across in the songs. They're not deep. They're not layered. And honestly, even on the level of these being just catchy radio rock songs, it still fails there because a lot of these lyrics just are so clunky. Some examples of this are in The Weight of the World, where David Escamilla is shouting, "I'm so sick!" And then there's no one listening! We don't know what we're meant to say. These points in the albums really feel like they're trying to be like really catchy and like get the audience involved for their live set. And I'm sure it will do that, but it's really cringy to listen to. Like, I see through it. It doesn't really accomplish what it's trying to do for me. I mean, it is kind of catchy in a way, but not really for the right reasons for me. I just feel like these lyrics are just so meaningless. I know this is becoming quite a negative review, but I do have to stress that I do actually really enjoy this album. You know, the only points that I don't really enjoy listening to are the instrumentals, because they just drag on a bit and don't lead up to anything. But every like actual song with lyrics and stuff on this album, although the lyrics are terrible and it feels very junk foody, this whole album, honestly. I do actually enjoy all the tracks individually. They do all feel very solid, at least on the level of being sort of radio rock songs. We do switch it up a bit on tracks like Signs of Life and Oxygen with some acoustic guitar and, you know, just a bit of a more laid back and slowed down pace, which I do feel is works well at that point in the album. So it does show that they do know something about making an album flow, even though it doesn't necessarily come across so much with like these just very disjointed instrumentals and stuff, but still. But the final track, Kaleidoscope, while again it's a fine song on an individual level, as an album closer, it's like it starts off pretty well for an album closer, but by the end I just feel like it's a bit anticlimactic, especially considering the closing track on the last album, Johnny's Revenge, was like 6 minutes long, and this is just like under 4-minute track. Is there stuff on this album I like? Yeah, I do enjoy most of these tracks, like I said. I like the fact that they've abandoned the generic metalcore aspect, but at the same time they've become generic, you know, even more generic perhaps, in the sense of becoming a generic radio rock band instead. And even on that level it fails in some ways, just with the clunky lyrics and stuff. The main track that I listen to just on its own sometimes, quite a lot actually, is Hologram. I find myself coming back to that song a lot. I love the nice guitar riff that it has at the start. I love the chorus and the synths that fly around in the background, and the bridge is also great. Just quite an epic song that I really enjoy. So that kind of does it for this review. Again, pretty big disappointment for me. What did you think of the new album? Was you disappointed, or are you pretty satisfied? I'd be happy to hear your opinions in the comments below. Ta-ta.